what I want to talk about today is our trip to Yosemite. So we took this trip to Yosemite with ShutterClick Adventures, and these trips are awesome. We do them really well. It's all inclusive. Everything's included. So you're basically your ride to and from the airport. We pick you up. We feed you. The minute you get into our hands, we feed you and we take you places. We feed your bellies. We feed your brains, and you get education while eating great food, and you get great pictures the whole time. So I mean, you can't beat it. So that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about our trip to Yosemite, and I wanted this at first. This trip to Yosemite started out like it was going to be this display here that I'm going to show you, this presentation I should say, started out like it was going to be just a quick run through of some of the pictures that I've taken. But I can't just run you through a couple of the pictures that I took. If you know me well enough, you know that I prepare and prepare and prepare and prepare. So I've got this extravagant PowerPoint here that's going to not only show you where we shot, but the locations. Is going to show you pictures, and I'm going to give you some personal kind of discussion about the images and some backstory behind these images, and talk a little bit more about these ShutterClick Adventures trips and how this goes off. And to do that, I might need to actually toss on my fedora here so that I can continue on with our presentation, because this is how you would see me every day when we were in Yosemite, wearing the fedora, rocking the fedora. So I'll go ahead and switch my screen over so that you can see the screen here, so that we are looking at the presentation here. So we went to Yosemite in May of 2016. I've got my PowerPoint presentations out wrong here, but we went in 2016. We have an upcoming trip in 2017 for ShutterClick Adventures over the course of the same period of time. We have a lot of fun on these trips. If you see the picture on the right there, that's me dressed up as if I am Ansel Adams. And if you've seen Ansel Adams' portrait, where he looks very much like I do, or I should say I look very much like he does. But Jake and I set this up. It was just kind of fun to see what life was like back then with cameras back then, and what life is like now with cameras now. So before we dive too far into the actual Yosemite experience, I want to talk about the ShutterClick Adventures trips, because these are education trips like no other that you're going to find out there. We've taken a lot of time to research what goes on at these workshops. We've taken inquiries from people at workshops, and Jake and I have come up with the best ways to make these Photoshop and photography experiences work for you. And I say Jake and I, but really it's Jake. So Jake is the guy on the upper right hand picture on the right hand side. Jake is hey, good morning. Got it. Someone coming through there. Hey, what's up, man? Jake is the man behind all of the stuff in ShutterClick Adventures. He founded ShutterClick Adventures, and then he found me in a roundabout way and asked me if I wanted to do a trip. And I said, yeah, you know what? I'd love to do that. How does this work? He said, you don't have to do anything. All I want you to do is tell me where you want to go. So I gave him a list of places that I want to go, and about 2 hours later, he comes back and says, okay, you can go ahead and put this website out there and tell people that you're going to do a trip to Oregon. So we did a trip to Oregon. That filled rather quickly. And then we did a trip to Yosemite, and that filled rather quickly. So Jake does all the administrative type stuff. He's also a very excellent photographer as well, and he's kind of my Lightroom guy when I'm doing my instructional stuff when we're actually on scene. So how it works is you go to ShutterClick Adventures, you sign up for a trip, you're in contact with Jake the whole time about that, and then once you get to the location, it's Jake and I, we take over and we cook for you, we feed you in every way possible, so that really all you have to do is show up and learn. That's our job, is to get you at an exponential level with your photography experience. And on our first trip, our Oregon workshop, we had someone say that it was kind of like Photoshop boot camp, that they never thought they would learn as much as they did in one 4-day period, and that was in Oregon. And now we've done Yosemite too, and these are some of the pictures that you just see. We're out there in the field, we're taking pictures. You see that one in the upper left-hand corner with me and Steve there, and we're just hanging out. We enjoy each other's company, and we do stuff. Now, the other important thing here is that we don't stay in hotels. We stay in giant condos, and the reason why we stay in condos is is so that we can keep everyone together and we can learn and educate the whole time. So what a day looks like on a ShutterClick Adventures trip. Well, we usually wake up before sunrise, long before sunrise, to go to the location that we want to go to, scope it out, and get there for a sunrise picture. So what that meant in Yosemite was that we were waking up at about 3:45 in the morning to be on the road by 4:30, and then we'd go out to our location, take our shots, and most people were napping by 9 o'clock in the morning by the time we got back to the condo. But the way it works is we do a morning shoot. Sometimes we'll do an afternoon shoot and an evening shoot. In between those times, like during lunch, I'll be educating while you're eating food or shortly thereafter. Jake cooks a mean meal. It doesn't matter what meal it is. If you see the size of those steaks down there, these steaks were the size of our face and they were very good. It was the best steak I think I've ever eaten in my life. But Jake cooks a mean meal. It doesn't matter what meal it is. He cooks a mean meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then I educate you while you're eating, very shortly after you're eating, and you learn how to edit the photos that you're taking while we're there. So I take photos alongside you. I help you while you shoot. You can use any of the equipment that I use or any of the equipment that's available there for you. You're free to use, and we just help you. So then after we do our education series in the afternoon, we have our evening dinner, and then during our dinner, we'll usually do a critique session from the images before, and then after dinner, we pack everything up and we go back out and we shoot until 9 o'clock at night, get back in the car, go back, and yes, there are some adult beverages there sometimes if you do partake in that sort of thing, and we hang out, we have a good time. So it's good fellowship, it's good company, we eat, we drink, we be merry, and we also learn a lot about Photoshop in the process. So along with that, here is where we stayed when we were in Yosemite. So if you see the map on the left, you see the little flag down there at the very bottom. We actually stayed just south of that. So that's a place called Fish Camp, and we would travel north every single day to get to the south entrance of Yosemite. And once we got into there, it took about 40 to 45 minutes to get in and out of Yosemite, which kind of was a pain a little bit here and there, but it wasn't too bad. It was one of those things where we talked a lot in the cars. We got to know each other very well. So we would travel from down here all the way up this road, all the way through here, all the way into Yosemite. From here, we could either split off and go to Glacier Point, which I'll talk about that later, or come up here and go right into the Yosemite Valley Loop. And this is where most of the action happens. And here's that map for you here a little bit larger. So it took us about 40 minutes in and 40 minutes out every single trip in and out of Yosemite. Kind of redundant by the end of the trip, but there really is no other convenient place to stay. If you've ever been to Yosemite, you either camp or you stay in the lodge. And for our photo trip, it wasn't very conducive to that. This place was perfect because about 10 minutes south of us, we had a gas station. We had all the amenities that we needed to cook and clean and do the things that we needed to do to make sure everyone's stay was what they wanted. So the first place I want to talk about is Lewis Creek Falls, and this is in just south of Fish Camp where we were staying. And I talk about this place because this is where we had our practice waterfalls, as I like to call them. And these practice waterfalls, they were rather small, but they were right there about 7 minutes of a drive and about 10 minutes walking from where we were staying in Fish Camp. So you could actually, if we were having some downtime and maybe you didn't want to be one of those people that would take a nap, either Jake or I would get in the car and we would take you out to Lewis Creek Falls and we would practice doing some exposures there on the waterfalls. It was a great place to practice because we could actually do some education and teaching about shutter speeds without having to worry too much about the park being littered with tons of people while we're trying to educate you, so that we could use this spot to do that before we moved on. And here's another one from Lewis Creek Falls. Pretty interesting shot here. I was actually linked up on the side of a rock and had my tripod kind of cockeyed to get that shot. But we talked a lot about different shutter speeds that you want for waterfalls, so that before we went into Yosemite, we kind of knew what to expect when we were shooting. So if you look here, this waterfall here, I really try hard not to get these really milky, creamy type of waterfalls. I like to have a little bit of texture in there, so you see that there's still some texture in these waterfalls, and that's tricky. You have to really go there and learn and understand the personality of these waterfalls. It sounds crazy to talk about a waterfall as if something that has a personality, but they do. So you have to go in there and get the personality of that waterfall and really just practice and practice and practice. You can't just throw an ND filter on there and do a 30-second exposure and expect it to be perfect. Most of these exposures were about a third of a second. The water was moving that fast that we really didn't even have to slow our shutter speed down. Hello, Richard. I see you just popped in. Good morning. So the next place we went to was Tunnel View in Yosemite. And Tunnel View is a really interesting place because you get just outside of the south end of the park here. So you're coming in from the south entrance, and here's a giant tunnel. And you're driving forever, what it seems, and then here's this tunnel. And as soon as you get out of this tunnel, the whole valley just opens up right in front of you. And that's what's so interesting about it. It's a boring drive. Okay, we got some hills and cliffs here, but we're pretty much surrounded by trees. And then, whoa, look at this crazy long tunnel. And then, bam, it just smacks you in the face of this absolutely gorgeous scene that you see in the postcards and in the movies. And this is what it looks like. Now, we had a lot of struggles with Tunnel View every single morning because we were driving in from the south, so every time we wanted to come in, we would pass Tunnel View. And it's a gorgeous scene, but the scene by itself is not enough. You need some structure, you need some texture up in the clouds, and it just wasn't enough. So the first morning we're sitting there, we had no clouds. Actually, every single morning that we were there, it was our biggest frustration. We'd wake up at 3:45 in the morning, we couldn't see any clouds, obviously, because it's still dark outside. So by the time we got to our location, it would be somewhat light, and we'd be disappointed that we had no clouds. And as a photographer, you really want those clouds, especially a landscape photographer, because they make the scene dramatic, all right? So with this shot, we were all posted up. There was us and about maybe 10 or 15 other photographers, and we're all waiting for the sun to rise and peak right here. This is El Capitan right here. Right alongside of this, the sun was going to come up. We kind of had an idea of where it was going to come up, but we weren't really sure, but it came up at the perfect time. It was one of those things that we were all just waiting and waiting and waiting. But when the sun came up, now you don't have a whole lot of time. There was no clouds in the sky. As the sun was coming up, I have an image taken 1 minute before this, and the sun isn't even here. And a picture a minute after this, and the sun is up here. And you literally lose it that quickly. So you have to be spot on. So we were all, as soon as that sun started peeking through the cracks of those mountain granite monoliths out there, you just heard everybody, all of these photographers just shooting like crazy. And it was awesome. It was exhilarating. It was one of those things where you're just like, you know, it was almost like a movie or something like that, where like the paparazzi is flaring on the on a landscape instead of, you know, the beautiful person walking down the red carpet. But the problem with this is that there was no sky here. So what I had to teach during this workshop was a lot of sky drop-ins. A lot of those, hey, we have a bad sky. What can we do to fix that? Well, let's put one in there and just kind of fake it to give it some texture in the sky. Because this shot without this little peaking of clouds over here, I'm telling you, it loses all of its magic and all of its flair. So we talked about realistic ways to actually drop in a sky to make it not look like someone dropped in a sky, that makes it look and match and blend and feel like it would if you were in Yosemite and actually saw those clouds in front of you rather than having to drop them in. But, you know, it was one of those... Here's another shot where if you actually look down there and you get maybe a wide or a zoom lens and zoom into there, you see Bridal Veil Falls. Here, let me go back here real quick because I want to point out some things. This right here is Bridal Veil Falls. These are called the Cathedral Rocks, or sometimes called the Three Brothers, depending on where you shoot it from. This is called El Capitan, and this back here is Half Dome, and then this right here I believe is Sentinel Dome. And it's important to know all these things because, you know, when you first show up in Tunnel View and you take this shot, you don't know the personalities of all these places. So as you take that first shot, you don't know that you see Half Dome there. You don't know that you see Bridal Veil Falls there. So as you start to understand the park and know the terms of the park, you get a better understanding of what the park has to offer you. And it's really awesome when you can actually relate to the park that way and know the things that you're shooting. So here is another one. This is Bridal Veil Falls with the Three Brothers or Cathedral Rock back there. And what I wanted to show you here was that if you look at this one, the sky dropped in right here. I also took the exact same sky and dropped it in right here so that it would look more realistic during that discussion about dropping in skies. That if you're going to drop in skies and you have multiple shots from that time period, you might want to drop in the sky on those multiple scenes. So Bridal Veil Falls. The thing about Tunnel View is that people get tunnel vision on tunnel view because it's beautiful. And I'll show you more pictures of tunnel view and talk about that more a little bit later on in the presentation. So we'll just move on a little bit. So the first place we went was tunnel view. And then the rest of that morning, we kind of spent going around the park and just going around the loop and getting familiar with the place. But I was not impressed by any of the pictures that I took because I didn't have a good sky. And I let that be my downfall. And I'm really kind of upset with myself that I let that be my downfall on the first day, because I recovered from that on day 2 and so on and so forth. And I'll talk about that as we go through. But that evening, so after that, we were done probably about 9 o'clock in the morning. We went and got a cup of coffee in the park, and then we drove back to our condo. Jake made lunch. I taught. Some people took naps. But the thing is, every day we have a critique session in the evening. So you have to have 2 to 3 images done by the evening for me so that I can put it up on the screen and we can all talk about your images and have a critique session. And it was one of those things that we were kind of hesitant to do in the beginning of these Shutterclick adventures. But what we've heard is that of everything that everyone's done on these Shutterclick adventures, their absolute favorite thing is a critique session. So that evening we went to Half Dome. On the way to Half Dome is one of my favorite places called Washburn Point right here. So we stopped at Washburn Point first, and then we jumped up to Glacier Point, because Glacier Point you get a really good shot of Half Dome. And we'll talk about that here in a second. So I'll move forward. This was from Washburn Point. This is one of those things that this is day 1. And in day 1, actually before day 1 even started, I was talking to everyone. I said, look, do you have your custom settings on your cameras? And many of them did have custom settings on their cameras. Some of them did not have their custom buttons set up. But I told them how important it was, because if you have your custom settings set up on your camera so that you can get an HDR bracketed series of images on one of your custom buttons, or a landscape button, or something that when you switch to that mode, you're automatically in the mode that you need to shoot. So I've got some of my custom settings set up. But as we were driving up to Washburn Point, we saw this from the car, and I was like, okay, everyone grab your gear, get out, go to that corner, go to that corner. So we all march out there, all 6 of us marching out there. Actually, there's 7 of us marching out there, set up our tripods, and we shot in the general location of that rainbow. The problem is with that rainbow that you only had about maybe 15 seconds to shoot this, because as soon as we got over there, we all got set up, we all started shooting, the rainbow was gone. The importance of those custom settings, though, is that I was able to drop my tripod down, put those custom settings on, and clack away and get the rainbow shot that was off of Washburn Point. So this is facing off of Washburn Point, kind of away from Half Dome, not towards Half Dome. And, it's one of those things that you don't have a whole lot of time sometimes. So you get those custom settings and you just shoot and you see what you come up with. This is another shot of Half Dome from that Washburn Point area. And you can see Half Dome is beautiful. And I have some more pictures here later of how Half Dome is sculpted and carved. And it's a beautiful granite structure that you just don't get the personality unless you really zoom in there. And I don't have that picture next, but it is coming up in the presentation. So you can really see the character of Half Dome. It's got this beautiful... man, I sound so crazy talking about this. I feel like Bob Ross, it's a beautiful rock structure with these nice line work in it. The way it's been carved in nature is absolutely gorgeous. So here's one of my favorite shots that I took. Most of these shots that you're seeing in this presentation are not what I would call portfolio-worthy shots. Many of them are for documentation purposes only. I'd say out of this, though, this is probably one of my favorite shots. But this, we're looking down onto the valley from Glacier Point, looking all the way down into this valley. And you can see Yosemite Falls right here. You can see over here, you got like the swinging bridge area right here. And you can see everything throughout the whole falls. This is the lodge. Over here at the lodge, you could stay there if you wanted to, but it's really expensive to stay there. And then you grab a cup of coffee up in around here, and shoot the Yosemite Falls. We were shooting Yosemite Falls from right around here. I believe the coffee place is right here. But you come into the valley and you drive around the whole valley, and as you drive around the whole valley, this is what you're seeing. But when you go up to Glacier Point and you see it from up there, it is just absolutely gorgeous. And when we were up there, a storm was passing through over the valley, and we were just outside of it. I mean, we're not talking far away, but you could see the storm just coming through all the way across, and it was absolutely gorgeous. But one of the things I want to talk about here is when you look at this as a wide-angle image, yes, it's beautiful. Yes, it's gorgeous. Yes, it has a lot to offer us. But What happens if you just zoom in to one little spot? See, the thing is, when you're up there and you're waiting for sunset, you have a lot of time. So the thing is, especially when you're up at Glacier Point, you go up there early and you get your location and you stake your claim on it like it's the most valuable form of real estate you've ever seen in your life. Because if you don't, 15 other photographers are going to do it, and they're going to try and punch you in the face to get it. And I'm not joking, or I am joking. They won't punch you in the face. But I was right next to this male and female. I guess they probably married or a couple or something like that. But they didn't have a camera. They were just standing there in the spot that I wanted. And I begrudgingly wanted to just tell them to move because I'm a photographer, and you get that kind of ego. But you can't do that because they're enjoying the experience as much as you are enjoying the experience. They're just doing it with a different form. So if you're ever in a national park and someone's in your way like that, don't try and say, hey, can you move so I can take the shot? That's just rude. What I ended up doing was I started talking to them, and I grabbed my Polaroid SX70 out of my bag, and I said, hey, do you guys mind if I take your portrait right here with Yosemite Falls behind you? And they said, oh, you would do that with a Polaroid? I said, yeah, sure. So I snapped the picture with their Polaroid, got to know them, asked them where they were coming from. And at first you could tell that they knew that I was trying to get that real estate from them, but then I breached that. I started talking to them. I got to know them. They were a very nice couple. And then they said, oh, do you want this spot? And I said, that'd be great. So they let me move in and get that spot. So that's the thing. Don't think that just because you're a photographer that you deserve that space. That space was, they staked their claim on it first. And I'm not saying that I was doing something to get that space from them. It was nice that they offered it up to me. But that's what happens when you're actually kind to people instead of mean to people. But I want to talk about this spot right here because I often shoot with a wide angle lens, and I'm like a wide angle junkie, and I love it. But when I was up there, I had a lot of time to just sit and wait for sunset. So I threw my 70-300 on. I just started moving around the valley and just taking different pictures of different spots. And one of the things that really stuck out to me was this spot right here. So I zoomed in at 70-300. That's the exact same spot. I just zoomed in with a 300mm lens, and I was able to see some more of the personality of the park. And that's where things get really interesting. A wide angle lens is great. It's great to use a wide angle lens because I use them all the time. But really get in there and look at the personalities of things, because there are some gorgeous things that happen in the park that you're never going to see again. So toss that 70-300 on. If you have another camera, then just toss a 70-300 on your sidearm camera and take some pictures with that, so that you still have your landscape set up with your tripod mounted camera. So just some things to think about, because this is one of my favorite pictures from the entire thing. You see the power and the magnificence of Upper Yosemite Falls just blasting away down here. And it blasts away down here and then goes down to Lower Yosemite Falls. When you're down here looking at Yosemite Falls and shooting it, it's crazy. It's huge. So this waterfall here is ungodly large. It's huge. So just to see it in its personality, that zoomed in, you get to see the scope and brilliance of this water just flowing down, and just you can imagine if you were to put a car under there, you wouldn't see anything left of it. It would just be obliterated. So here's more of that storm that's moving through. It was just nice to be able to capture that storm in the way as it was moving across the valley. It eventually hit us, so a lot of us just scurried off and ran, which was we should have stayed, because the problem, we scurried off because it started pouring all over our gear and our equipment, and we didn't think we were going to get a good sunset. And then as we're driving away, not even 15 minutes later, the whole sky turned into this red glowing fire. It would have been a phenomenal sunset, but that's the thing. You stay there and you wait. Time is key. Light is key. You stay there and you wait. But it was gorgeous. Either way, we still had a lot of fun. The next day, day 2, we woke up, and again, we did the same thing. Wake up at 3:45 in the morning, grab a quick breakfast on the way out. Everyone piles in the cars. We had 2 cars. Jake was driving one car. I was driving the other car. Some people slept in the cars on the way. Other people, if you're in my car, you're probably chatting away, because if you're anything like me, I chat all day long if you don't tell me to shut up, especially if it's about something I love like photography. So 3:45 in the morning, we wake up, we're gone. We're out the door. Get to the park by about 4:45, actually about 5:45, because we would leave at 4:30 and get in there about 5:30-ish. And then we would scope out the location we wanted to shoot, and we'd camp there for a little bit until the sun started to rise. So day 2, we went to the swinging bridge in the Lower Yosemite Falls. The swinging bridge is the first little node you see here on the map. Right here is the swinging bridge, and right here is Lower Yosemite Falls, just to give you some direction as to where we were yesterday. In the last one, we talked about tunnel view. That was tunnel view right there. We also talked about Glacier Point, just to put things in perspective. We were up here at Glacier Point, shooting down into the valley, and I showed you where Swinging Bridge was from that Glacier Point. So everything's so connected in this park. It's beautiful. All right, so here's one of these shots that I took from the Swinging Bridge, and really this was an experiment. It was an experiment because the sky sucked. Sorry, but it was horrible. We didn't have any clouds, so it was more like, well, how am I going to turn this into something that's workable? How can I turn this into something that I like? So a lot of times I would shoot for reflections. We talked about this when we were making our way out to the park and during our discussions. It is a workshop, so we give away all of our secrets. And part of this was, hey, don't really shoot too much for the sky. Let's focus on reflections, because in those reflections we can make more magic happen. And the scene will kind of talk to the viewer based off of what they see in the reflection. They know that something exists above them. Let's show them what's in the foreground and show them a reflection. So with this one, I actually was using my Sony a7R II, and it's got an app in there called Smooth Reflection app, and it takes a series of pictures. So for this, I did, I think, 96 pictures. It took all 96 pictures from the Swinging Bridge, and it compiled them. So I did a couple things with this experiment. I wasn't just experimenting with the app. I was experimenting with the image stabilization in the Sony a7R II, because there were some kids running on the Swinging Bridge, and it is a swinging bridge. It swings when you're taking a picture. So here I am with a quasi-long exposure. It was actually 96 pictures that were still frames that ended up getting stacked on top of each other to make this image. So while that was happening, kids were running back and forth on the Swinging Bridge. So I was testing the capabilities of the a7R II. I was testing the capabilities of the app, number one, to see if it would give me a realistic looking, smooth, long exposure, and it did. And I was also testing the 5-axis stabilization, because it wasn't swinging violently back and forth, but it did have a gentle sway to it. Enough of a sway that I thought, well, maybe if I have the 5-axis stabilization engaged, it will work. And it actually did. So I ended up being able to pull this image out. And I really like how we get this nice zooming perspective. We get kind of wrapped in by this tree and then zoom back into here. But all the while, we still see all this stuff back here. Oh, and we also see a nice little waterfall. And there's Lower Yosemite Falls dumping. Actually, I believe that's Upper Yosemite Falls dumping into Lower Yosemite Falls down here. So, it did get a pretty good shot from that. Here is Lower Yosemite Falls. So, the beauty of going into the park is you got to go in there early. And when I mean early, I mean like get there at 5:45 in the morning, because you're going to weed out all of the tourists because they don't want to be up that early. You're going to get the prime locations and the prime spots. So one of the things about Lower Yosemite Falls, if you go there just at the right time, you can actually catch a double rainbow where there's so much mist and haze coming through that when the sun beats through that mist and haze, it creates that double rainbow effect. We were running around like kids in a candy store taking pictures of this, but I have to tell you, this is one of the most difficult things to shoot, because the falls were dumping at a much more rapid rate than they ever do. We're talking like there was so much water coming down that you couldn't stand on the bridge at Lower Yosemite Falls without getting drenched in spray, in waterfall spray. And I guess this is the most amount of water they've had in the last 4 years. So we got really lucky when we went out there, and we had some beautiful shots. Anyway, so you basically had to set your tripod up, shoot the picture, wipe off your lens, shoot the picture, wipe off your lens, shoot a picture, wipe off your lens, and then run outside of there and wipe off your entire camera, because your entire camera will be soaked. So if you didn't have some type of weatherproofing on your camera, I can imagine that you wouldn't be spending very much time in front of this spot. But it was beautiful. But it was also very hard to capture this double rainbow effect in the pictures and do it effectively. And a lot of it has to do with the post-processing aspect of things. It's very yellow. The whole shot was very yellow because of the time of day and everything. It was very difficult to even get as much as I did out of these rainbows here. But again, we start talking about capturing the falls. So while we were at the Swinging Bridge, we went away from the Swinging Bridge, drove down a little bit as we were on our way to the Lower Yosemite Falls, and you actually see Yosemite Falls dumping here. And you can sit there with the 70 to 300 lens, go all the way out to 300 millimeters, and you can see the personality happening and forming in front of you with every single second, that you're going to see different water coming off of the rocks. It's absolutely phenomenal when you zoom in there and you look at the personality of these scenes. So it doesn't matter what national park you were at, or even if you're in, a city or something like that. do some wide angle stuff to get it out of your system and to capture the whole vastness of the scene, but then really get in there, dig real deep, get as deep as you can with that 300. If you have a 600, get a 600, go as deep as you can to really show off the personality of these different parts of the park. So if you're just joining us, I'm talking about our May 2016 trip to Yosemite, and we're also discussing the May 2017 trip because we're going back there in 2017 in the same time frame that we went in 2016. But I was also talking about how we have a lot of fun. So here's me, got my tripod set up looking like Ansel Adams here, got my fedora, and then my Sony camera all set up, and here's what we were shooting after. So try to look like our good old buddy there, Ansel Adams, who paved the way for us to take the pictures that we take in Yosemite. And I'm no Ansel Adams, I'm really not. But it was fun to live like he lived, go to the same places that he did. And more importantly, I've created the zone systems in Photoshop, but to teach the zone systems in Yosemite was just... It was phenomenal. It was great. So if you're just joining us, we're talking about the Yosemite trip, giving you a little bit of lay of the land, where we went, the places that we went to, parts on the map of where we were on the map, and going through all of the locations that we shot. So that evening, some of us went to Sentinel Dome. The thing about Sentinel Dome is it's about a 2-mile hike. A lot of it is a vertical hike, so it can be very trying on you. And it was very trying on us. And fatigue sets in because we were really tired. We weren't just shooting day 1 and day 2. We had also shot some waterfalls on day 0, if you want to call it that. And we did a lot of hiking then, a couple miles hiking, up and down, up and down. So fatigue was setting in by the time we went to Sentinel Dome, and it really sets in on you, and you have to maintain lots of water. We pushed that so much. It didn't matter. There was always a case of water in each car that you could grab some water, so that nobody was dehydrated. But fatigue sets in about this time in all of our trips, where everyone's just kind of tired, and it's only day 2, but you're waking up early and you're doing your thing. So here's Sentinel Dome. You actually drive up to Glacier Point just like we did on day 1, and there's a point you can stop right here and do a hike all the way up to Sentinel Dome. Now Sentinel Dome, it's interesting that some people say you always take such great photographs, Blake. Yeah, you don't see the stuff that's not very good. So here's one of those ones where I was using a graduated neutral density filter, and I was shooting into the sun, and I could see the reflection of my lens in the graduated neutral density filter, and I took a picture not realizing it, and this is what I came up with. It's kind of cool. It's a good advertisement for Zeiss, I guess, but it was one of those things where I was just experimenting with the graduated neutral density filter on this night where the sun was just beaten right through. I mean, we couldn't keep up with it. You couldn't get a good spot where the sun wasn't obliterating you. And again, you need that cloud coverage up there. But regardless, we still had some good shots up there. So if you've ever seen this shot, this is Ansel Adams, the Jeffrey Pine on top of Sentinel Dome. And I hate to say it, but it fell down. It's no longer up like that. So you can't get that iconic Ansel Adams shot up there. So we climb all the way to Sentinel Dome to look at this. And I think we knew that the tree was down anyway because you don't see any pictures of it like this. But here it is. Still, a good shot up there and lots of beautiful. I mean, you can get a really good 360 pano of the whole park from up here. So that's why Sentinel Dome is pretty cool. In the distance there, you can see Half Dome. Now notice when I was talking about personalities, when you're at the same height as Half Dome though, like we were with Sentinel Dome, especially in this direction and shooting off towards it, you can barely tell that Half Dome exists. So it's not as magical when you shoot Half Dome from Sentinel Point. Again, think about the personalities. It's just like if you take a picture of a person. What's the angle that you need to get on this person? Is it a low angle, high angle, straight on? Do you like the light on this side of the person, on this side of the person? A lot of people don't think about portraiture in landscape, but you have to, okay? So again, here's another shot of Half Dome, zoomed in, 300 millimeters. It doesn't look quite as brilliant and magnificent as it does from Washburn Point. And that's because the angle that you're at, you've got a mountain that competes with it behind it. So even though Half Dome is a monolithic, giant, beautiful rock, it doesn't come off that way when you've got another giant, beautiful rock behind it. Okay, so think about the places that you shoot and where you shoot so that you're shooting the best personality of those places in the park. So here is the other way, facing the other way. If you take a look here, we are facing the other way on Sentinel Dome, so you can see the other side of the park, where you come in on the south side of the park. Here's El Capitan, here's those three brothers, or Cathedral Rock, and here's the base of Sentinel Dome where we are. If you look way back here, guess what that is? That is the viewpoint. You can see all the cars there. That's the viewpoint of tunnel view shooting back into the park. So I'm telling you, everything is connected there, and they've got these roads set up so beautifully. The only problem with getting to Sentinel Dome and Washburn Point and Glacier Point is that it is closed on between November and May. So we got really lucky that it was actually open, because sometimes even into the middle of May it's closed because they still have snow up there. As a matter of fact, as I got a text message or an email from one of the people that was on our trip with us, they stayed in Yosemite for another couple days, and they went up to Glacier Point, and while they were up at Glacier Point, it started raining, then it started hailing, then it started snowing, and by the time he got to the base of the mountain, it took him 3.5 hours, and it should have taken him to get to the base of that, where you're actually driving up to Glacier Point. It should only take you about 15 to 20 minutes to get up there. It took him 3.5 hours, and he said he saw about 8 to 10 cars that swerved off the side. So it's really important that you go there at the right times and you obey all of those rules and laws, okay? But it was a gorgeous spot to go to. If we just had a better sunset, it would have been awesome. But you know what? We did the experience, and we had a lot of fun doing it. Day three, we did Mirror Lake and Tunnel View again, but day 3 in the morning, we skipped day 3's morning. And the reason why we skipped day 3's morning was because we were all very tired. We were very exhausted. We looked at the forecast, and we saw that in the forecast, we weren't going to have any clouds anyway. So we really wanted to capture the right places in the right light. So day 3 in the morning, what we did was we took an extended period of time where I just pretty much taught all morning. A couple of us even went back to the Lewis Creek Falls that I talked about in the beginning of this to do some practice waterfall shooting. But for the most part on day 3, it was teach and eat and teach and eat and have a good old time. And I think we did 3 photos for that critique that evening. But we went to Tunnel View and Mirror Lake. It was kind of a funny story here, because I have to start this off. Sometimes Jake and I, we think so much alike that sometimes it's our downfall. And Jake said, you know what, I'm going to go off and take the car off first and throw the trash away. And I said, okay, cool. We'll meet you at the trash drop-off point. Well, I didn't know where the trash drop-off point was. I assumed I knew where it was. And so I drive up to where I thought the trash drop-off point was. We waited there for 20 minutes and couldn't find Jake. So we said, what the heck? Let's just go. Let's just leave. So in my car, people, we left and we went towards the valley. But we also had horrible cell phone reception, so I couldn't even call Jake if I wanted to, all right? Another thing, this was a miscommunication on Jake and I's part, but it worked out all right. Our goal was to go to Mirror Lake. Now, there's 2 sides to Mirror Lake, and I'll tell you this because I was utterly pissed about this. And it was nobody's fault but our own, really, because we didn't really know where we were going, but we still had fun doing it. So we went to Tunnel View first on the way in, and then we went to Mirror Lake. So this is Mirror Lake. I had to take a picture of Mirror Lake just to show that I was there and I took a picture of it. And I'm not quite sure if what you're seeing in this picture is the movement of the water, or if that's all the mosquitoes that had just eaten all of me and the rest of the people that were with us. But the problem with Mirror Lake is there's 2 sides to it. If you shoot one side of it, you can actually get a really good shot of Half Dome at sunset with a reflection. If you do the other side, you don't get Half Dome. You get some other rock, which that other rock is still gorgeous, but when you're in the park, it's Half Dome that you want in that shot, not the other side of the park. But here's a good shot at Tunnel View that I want to talk about, because Tunnel View is great, it's gorgeous, it's beautiful at a wide-angle lens like this. Ansel Adams took many gorgeous shots of Tunnel View like this. But I beg you and I implore you to put a 70 to 300 millimeter lens on and just have some fun. And I say specifically a 70 to 300 millimeter lens, not a 300 millimeter lens, not a 70 millimeter lens, but a zoom lens, okay? And the reason why is because you can start to see the personalities at 70, at 100, at 120, at 250, at 300. I'm not going to beat the point on this one too much, because I actually did a whole lecture series on the personality of a scene using a zoom lens like that. But here's where you can pick the park apart and just look at different parts of the park. I beg you to try and say that 10 times fast. pick parts of the park, pick park. So here we have Bridal Veil Falls right here. We got, the 3 brothers right here. We got Half Dome in the background and Sentinel Dome. You can see all of it right in one little shot like that. But then here's another shot where we just move a little bit to the left, maybe zoom out to the more like the 100 millimeter range. You got Half Dome, you got El Capitan right here, and you've got Bridal Veil and the Three Brothers of Cathedral Rock. Here we have a more zoomed in shot with just Bridal Veil and just Half Dome in there to get that nice perspective of how things move in the scene. And then we've got this one with El Cap. Cliff's coming in saying this was a great trip. Yeah, Cliff was on our trip, and Cliff helped us make the steaks the last night. And I tell you, man, he's like a barbecue connoisseur. These steaks were, oh my gosh, they were so good. Thanks, Cliff. But here you got El Cap, and then over here you've got Half Dome. It was a great time to just move in and zoom around and see what you could get. Here's another one, another personality shot of Half Dome with some nice clouds behind it. A different shot, different angle, and a different scope of what Half Dome looks like. Here we zoom in a little bit farther and we get right into Bridal Veil Falls at 300 millimeters. That starts to look gorgeous. Then we zoom in a little bit farther, start to see all the personality that's right there as that thing is dumping all over the place. And then we move all the way over to El Cap, and we see what the granite looks like. It's important to understand what the granite looks like at 300 millimeters, 400 millimeters, 500 millimeters. Why? Because as you're shooting it, you can better understand how light is going to hit it, how light's going to reflect off of it, even at your wide angle lenses, so that you know what times to go back there and when to shoot it when you go back there. I mean, this is where you really get into the nitty gritty of the personality of the scene. This is what the rocks look like. Yes, you've got this beautiful open space of tunnel view, but look at how much violence had to go into the shaping and the structure of this, all the scars that are here on El Capitan. I mean, this is where it starts to bring out the personality of the park like no other. So here's a good perspective shot for you of here's the wide angle view, but then let's zoom into all these different parts and see all these different parts of the park that we can get and just how magical it is. So day 4 was our last day of shooting. We did a couple things on day 4. We basically, in the morning of day 4, we did our normal thing, wake up, go into the park, and shoot the things that you wanted to shoot. So we split the cars off, and one car went in the direction of where they wanted to go, another car went in the direction where they wanted to go. During these trips, what we like to do is we like to make sure that the people get what they want to get. That they get the shots that they want to get. And if that means splitting up the cars, that means splitting up the cars. That also means making a plan the night before to say, okay, this is the things that we've done. Who wants to go back here? Who wants to do this? Who wants to do this? So this is what it looks like on the map, all the different places that we shot. We came right in here. This is just outside of Tunnel View. Right down here is Bridal Veil Falls. This is going to be the Cathedral Rocks, and this is going to be Lower Yosemite Falls. So really what I did here is the first place we went, if you know how the loop works, the first place we went is we went into the Lower Yosemite Falls and shot the Lower Yosemite Falls because we really wanted to capture the light on your Lower Yosemite Falls and at first light in the morning. So that was our first stop, and we just walked along the road there, and it was just it's awesome. You see how this huge waterfall dumps into here and then makes all these little teeny tiny little waterfalls all the way down. And there's even some water that's coming down the side of the rocks because there's so much spray coming off of these that it's making its own waterfalls down the sides of the rock. Incredible, the amount of water that was coming off of the mountains. Here's one of the Cathedral Rock view, but I wasn't a big fan of the view that I was getting because the sky was bad. So I shot down towards the water and made the water and the reflection my focal point. But what I really liked was this one tree right here that just seems to stick out so well in the middle of this image, even though it's chaotic. There's a lot of chaos happening in this, but this one little thing right there just braces us down. That's what I liked about this shot. I went back to Bridal Veil Falls. Now, the first time we went to Bridal Veil Falls, we walked up to it. It was on day 1, and we all got drenched. It was one of those things like you couldn't get a shot of it because we just got soaked. But I learned the strategy of shooting the waterfalls there when there's that much water coming down of the shoot, wipe, shoot, wipe, shoot, wipe technique. So it was my goal to go back to Bridal Veil Falls and get this shot of Bridal Veil Falls. So what did I have to do? I had to shoot, had to wipe, had to shoot, had to wipe, had to shoot, had to wipe, and I had to walk out of the frame, had to clean my whole camera off, go back in, shoot, wipe, shoot, wipe. This one shot took me about 40 minutes to get because of all the shoot, wipe action that I had to do in order to make it work. It was a pain in the butt, but it was worth it in the end. So think about those things when you go to these places that you might not get it the first time, And there might even be a possibility to get it the first time because there might be 15 or 20 people there trying to get it that first time. Well, then you can come back later and just scope out those areas and when the light's going to be the best on them. And this is one of my favorite shots of the whole trip, just because I really was trying very hard to get it. And again, it shows the personality of the waterfalls, of how Bridal Veil Falls is just dumping right in there and creating all these little streams that run all throughout the entire park. On the last evening, we went to Glacier Point again, right at the top of Yosemite Valley. And we've seen this before. I'll show you again. This time it wasn't raining, so we had a blue sky up there with some nice clouds as our background, and it was a good time. We didn't have to worry too much about getting soaked this time. And we scoped out our spots the first time we were up there, so we knew the spots to get. So we all kind of gravitated towards those spots. We got those spots. I believe this was the evening that I actually hijacked that spot from the nice couple that was there. And here you see a different view of Half Dome. With this one, I was doing some experimenting through a 10-stop ND filter on there to get a 30-second exposure of the movement of the clouds, get a different viewpoint of Half Dome, just to see what Half Dome looked like with a wide-angle perspective. But again, I learned my lesson well, that Half Dome is much more beautiful when you get a good personality shot of it. It's almost the same shot. I just went in and tightened up right here and got this shot here, and not with a 30-second exposure, but with those nice clouds behind it. But you can see how Half Dome is carved here. And I'm going to show you another shot that's just going to blow you away. But one of the things that I really liked about this was not just the clouds, but also this 3-point perspective that's happening here with everything zooming in and rushing in. So here is what Half Dome looks like when you get a good 300 millimeter zoom on it. Actually, I know that some people might belittle me for this one, but I took my Sony a7R II, which has the ability to go into crop sensor mode. I went into crop sensor mode and took that 300 to 450. And I knew that I was going to be losing pixels on it, and I didn't care, because for me, it wasn't about the loss of megapixels or the sharpness or any of the things that we baffle and beat ourselves up with. This was an experiment in cropping, in moving, and looking around the scene. I didn't care that I was losing megapixels. I didn't care that I was possibly losing sharpness. All I cared about was the fact that I was doing something different with my lenses and my equipment to see things like I wanted to see it. I wanted to see on scene, without having to crop in later in post-processing, I wanted to see what Half Dome looked like. All the tears that this thing has been shedding over the course of years as water drops all over it and creates these just gorgeous line work in this rock. And I didn't care that I was losing megapixels. It didn't matter to me. Another shot that I got from up there, which was really interesting, was this shot towards the mountains, just to the right-hand side of Half Dome. I just love the mountains, and I love the background. I knew that this was something I could turn into a good black and white photograph in that Ansel Adams nature. You haven't seen too many black and whites, and I didn't put too many black and whites in this presentation. I did that because I wanted you to see the scope of the park in color so that you have an idea of what it actually looks like when you're there, and not put it in black and white, because there's something brilliant about it when you see it in full color like that. So with this one, the moon was not this big, I'll tell you that. Okay, the moon was probably about half this size. But I liked how big the moon looked, but it was so difficult to get the moon to be there in the perspective that I wanted it in. So in post-processing later, I took another shot of the moon that I had at 300 millimeters, and I put the 300 millimeter moon on top of the more like 100 millimeter moon that you would have seen in this one. So again, I was trying to push the mold a little bit, make it look realistic, but also give it a slight exaggeration of the size of the moon, just to give you the scope and feel and grandeur of the moon there. So it is what it is. You call it art, call it cheating. I don't care what you call it, but I like it, and I like the black and white that I got from it. Now, another black and white where one of the things I taught during this was how to get really good black and white images in that Ansel Adams scope. Like, how do you turn your blues into blacks? How do you get that high contrast of light to dark, but still maintain a good amount of midtones in the image? So we talked about black and white processing. We did a whole, I think it was about a 2-hour lesson on the different ways of black and white and how to get the black and whites to look like those Ansel Adams-esque black and white images. And I was fairly happy with this one of tunnel view in that black and white. I want to go back when it's snowing, obviously, to get that nice Ansel Adams looking with the fog and the clouds kind of coming through tunnel view. That would be gorgeous. But I think I need to live more near the park in order to get all that stuff. So here's the map, and this is what it looks like. These are all the places that we covered. We did Tunnel View, we did Bridal Veil Falls, we did the Cathedral Rock viewpoint, we did Swinging Bridge, we did Lower Yosemite from over here, we did Yosemite Falls from its viewpoint, we did Glacier Point, we did Washburn Point, we did Sentinel Dome, and we also did Mirror Lake. So it was quite a bit to cover in the park in 4 days, and it was a lot of fun. So here's another group shot of us. So you can see I showed this in the beginning, but here it is in the end. Here's us at Mirror Lake getting eaten alive by the multitudes of mosquitoes that were out for blood. Here's us eating something not alive, and we also weren't out for blood. But these steaks were just phenomenal. And Cliff, man, you can do a mean steak. But it was a good time. We had a lot of good people. And it was a completely international trip. We had people from all over the world there. And it was awesome. It was awesome. It was a great time. I met some great people. And you think you're staying in a house with this many people that you're gonna start to hate each other, and you don't. We got along really well. We're all adults. We had a great time. And we ate. We had a lot of fun. Ton and I, we took our Polaroid SX70 portraits of each other and signed them, and then gave them to each other. So that was pretty cool. And then some good action shots of everyone just enjoying themselves while we were out at the park. Here is a shot of me and Steve as we were shooting something. I was showing him a good angle to take a picture from. What you don't see in this picture is that as I walked away from Steve, I left my camera bag open and my 50mm lens fell on the ground. Luckily, Steve was right there, and he was nice enough to pick that up for me and point that out. I tell you, I'm the worst person when it comes to this stuff. So if you like this and you're interested in this, we do have a Yosemite trip coming up from May 14th to the 18th of 2017. And that price is all inclusive. It does not include your travel and airfare, but it does include everything once you get to us. It includes everything. We've had people that don't even spend a dime when they come with us. And then, it just depends on what you want to do while you're there. Buy souvenirs, buy whatever you need to buy. And then we're also doing one in New Orleans. We're doing a composite workshop this November from 14th to the 18th. We're going to have a model. We're going to photograph that model, and then we're also going to photograph some of the scenes in New Orleans and do a composite of the model on those scenes from New Orleans. So it should be a lot of fun. So I'll go ahead and switch myself over here so that you don't see this anymore. If anyone has any questions, I can answer some of those. Let me get out of this viewpoint here. Anybody have any questions about our trips to Yosemite? It was great to see everyone popping in here. Thank you. Okay. I think that'll about cover it then. What's special about Yosemite in May? Okay, what's special about Yosemite in May? That's a good point. What's special about Yosemite in May is that in May, that's when you get all of the what do you call it? The water coming off of the mountains from the burn off, I guess, if you want to call it that, of the snow that's coming off the mountains to put all the water in there. Now, I've been there in October. I'm wearing my fedora in case anyone wanted to know this whole time, just to get into the Ansel mindset. I'm wearing the Ansel fedora. So I went there in October the first time with my wife in 2010, and those waterfalls looked like pencils. And I'm not joking. There was really nothing for Bridal Veil Falls. It looked like a teeny tiny little pencil line. And then over at Yosemite Falls again, it was very. It wasn't anything that I thought was grand or epic in any stretch of the imagination. It was because there wasn't enough runoff from the snow on the mountains to be melted off to create the waterfalls that are created. So in May is probably the best time to go because you get a lot of the water burning off and coming down into those waterfalls. So that's a good question. The best time to plan for it. And also in May is that you don't have as many tourists in May, especially if you go between that time period, because they're also one of those Memorial Day to Labor Day type of things where between May and September, they have the most people come through there. So if you're there before that time frame, you don't get the whole park to yourself. But if you go there early enough in the morning like we did, you definitely do. So that's one of the best times to go. November is a great time of year to visit the south, not hot and humid at all. Yeah, that'd be a good point too. And the weather in May isn't bad either. And we had days that got up into maybe the 70s, 80s, but it wasn't too hot. And then the evenings were nice and cool, 40s to 50s. So we would come back to the condo and I'd make a fire. We even had people there that had never had a s'more before. So Jake and I gave them the s'more experience with real dark chocolate, the expensive stuff, good graham crackers, good marshmallows, and gave them the s'more experience too. So not only did they come to Yosemite and learn a lot, they also ate some s'mores. Well, thank you for showing up and taking a look at this presentation for Yosemite. I really do appreciate it. If you have any questions about it, always feel free to email me or leave me a message here on the Facebook page or wherever. I'm all over the web. Leave me a message. I'll get back to you. Thank you very much for watching.